name is Chase Johnson. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and we have used C3 Group several times on some of our large loss commercials and our higher end residential for their appraisal services and their public adjusting services. Their knowledge of the market, of the ever-changing regulations, and their ability to...
Happy Friday, everybody. Lead meteorologist Sean Choquette here for us. As always, the C3 Group and Merlin Law Group. You can check out both of their pages in the description below here on Facebook for sponsoring our videos. As always, we're going to do the fall forecast first, then we'll get into today and tomorrow's hail risk, and we'll still check in on the tropics as well. So, 2019 fall hail forecast, just kind of going over how this year has been so far and comparing it to the previous years. So just kind of recapping before we get into what to expect the rest of this year. This year has been a weird one. If you notice, I think your eyes probably immediately go to August. We had over 1,129 hail reports in August. So especially if you're in the Minneapolis area, you're like, man, August seemed pretty active. And it was. This is the second most active August ever. The average is only about 625 reports. Just compared to last year, we had about 700, we had like 584 in a very active 2017. And you kind of notice this year was very quiet until we got to May. So basically, I figured there'd be a bit of a late start, but I didn't think it'd be this late. And how quickly it ramped up. Most of those 2,000 reports in May actually happened in those last 2 weeks. And then we had about 1,589. Again, almost half of that number was the first week of June. July was fairly active, more active than what 2017 July was. Slightly, just you're really starting to get marginal in terms of comparing it to 2018. And then August was significantly higher. We're actually even higher up in September now. This number was from a few days ago, and we got not including the 4-star day and Greeley or anything. So again, we're almost 1,000 more hail reports than 2018 at this point. I've almost 1,000 back from 2017, so we're kind of hitting that immediately in the middle between the most recent 2 years. The average is about 6,700, so actually above average just the tiniest bit. Kind of surprised that that's what is happening. If you just took the spring itself, it was a little below average, but the summer has really kind of resurged the year so far. I'm curious to see where we're going to actually end out 2019. In terms of big hail days, we've had one day over 200 hail reports. It was nearly 300 hail reports. It was very close. 3 that were over 150. We had 15 at over 100. So identical to last year in terms of just number of days that had ample amount of hail. But we had one day that had a little bit more, and pales in comparison to 2017, we had a lot more hail. Again, we're about 1,000 reports behind from what 2017 had, so it doesn't really come as much surprise that we are far behind that, and right around where 2016 was. In terms of the 3, 4, and 5-star maps, we're now past, and again, I did not update this for the storms this week, so we're at 54 3-star maps and 15 4-star maps, which is higher than last year. We have one, maybe we can squeeze out one more 5-star map and we'll tie what we had last year. And again, still pale in comparison to 2017, which was very active with lots of hail going on. Reviewing over 2019 so far, so we already saw those numbers. We're sitting at 7,058. I think it's a little higher than that now because it's pretty much been hailing every single day, right around average, just above it. It's been a very strange year overall, where we've had a fairly slow start. Again, March and April had less hail combined than what August has had this year, which is very unusual. That above average tornado season, very above average for tornadoes. But in terms of hail, the hail didn't really reflect that activity, especially in the plains and especially in the spring. We had a lot of systems that just kind of missed the mark a little bit in terms of its overall potential. We had a lot of tornadoes mixed in with lines of storms, or there just wasn't enough instability for hail, but plenty of shear for tornadoes. So really elevate those numbers. Hurricane Dorian crapped out a bunch of tornadoes. So all those things are really making it so you get more tornadoes, but not so much hail. So there is a correlation between the two, but it's not as exclusively mutual as one would expect. So overall, we had another slow start, but it really got going once May started, and it hasn't really let go. I mean, we had from April 25th or 6th all the way till September 3rd. We had hail, at least one hail report every single day. And we even still mapped hail on the 3rd, so it was September 8th. Was the first time since April 25th or 26th, one of those 2 days, where we didn't map anything, which I think is also, the longest we've gone of mapping at least one hailstorm since Hail Trace's existence. So again, very long, drawn out, everything's kind of spread out. We had long droughts of just hail happening in the middle of nowhere, and then suddenly like Minneapolis would get hit, or now it's September and Greeley gets hit 2 days in a row. Things just kind of fall into place. The weather's weird. What are you going to do? And again, mentioning August had more hail than March and April combined, which is very unusual. April is typically one of the more busy months. In the past 2 years now have been pretty lackluster. So I picked one storm to be the MVP of the year so far, and I'm going all the way back to March, which was the Allen McKinney-Frisco storm. I know a lot of folks in the Dallas area have been complaining that Dallas has been kind of a bust. You still got a great storm out of it. Unfortunately, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro needs about 4 of these to suffice for everyone. So I guess overall a fairly underwhelming year for the Dallas area, but we still got a really big storm just right out the gate on March 24th. Big time hail fell in the area, and here's just a couple reminder pictures. It's one of our 5-star maps. I almost put one of the second Minneapolis storm as the MVP, but we're going to kind of see where everything shakes out at the end of the year. Might have a countdown list or something when things get a little slower in the wintertime. Maybe just kind of recap in 2019 overall. So we're going to look over what we did in the hail forecast at the beginning of the year back in February. I said 2019 would be another year that would be off to a slow start with a quiet March. That was pretty much what we ended up happening. Activity would ramp up at the end of the month, followed by an active April. It ramped up at the end of March, but didn't quite make it there in terms of really ramping up in April. I was about a month off. It was the second week of May when things really went crazy and was nonstop for a while. Focus activity would be the plains and kind of redeem itself. Overall, 2019 was expected to be a near average year for the United States after a slow start to the season. This is specifically for the spring. Pretty much spot on what it was near average for just spring. You're going to take out the summer, just spring, and it was pretty near average, and it was a slow start, but once it got going, it got crazy. I had a little shrug emoji guy for focus to be the plains. The focus of severe weather was for sure in the plains, especially in May. The only problem was the hail ended up being more focused in the Great Lakes region, which was a kind of a surprise there. And then it ramped up. I was right about the ramp up, or being slow, and then you had to ramp up at some point. I was off by about a month, the second year in a row. I keep whiffing that one a little bit, guys, but that's how it goes. This was what we had for that forecast, and I forgot to have each individual animated one here. For the most part, I don't have the exact numbers written out compared to average and everything, but yes, the Denver area has had a fairly typical year. It just ended up being after June. Pretty typical year overall, but focused mostly in the summer. Fairly average activity here, I'd say, was about right, most active. You could argue that it was over here more so than over here. So below average, busted on that. Busted low, which I guess is good. You'd probably rather see more hail in an area that should end up being probably above average for the year. For the Northeast, I missed it horribly, mainly because you take one event in these states and you're going to suddenly be well above average. Pennsylvania had a banner year, and that made it so it was well above average for the whole region. And your average Southeast, that's also going to be a little debatable. I think it's going to be right near that number. So overall, I did okay here. Over here ended up being much more active than what we were expecting. I guess I was a little pessimistic on that one. So what's the current pattern looking like? We have a neutral ENSO pattern. Basically, El Nino and La Nina were neither. Right there in the middle, after we had a weak El Nino for the spring, which actually didn't really impact us too much for the overall severe weather threat. For here in the plains, ended up making things a little wetter, and that kind of minimized hail a little bit. But otherwise, it didn't really affect too much. Jet stream has stayed unusually far south. It gave the U.S. more severe weather for a longer amount of time. You need that kind of large-scale forcing for sustained severe weather like we've had. And also, it's what kept Hurricane Dorian mostly off the coast. We had a trough come through that's associated with the jet stream to kick Hurricane Dorian out just barely over the Outer Banks instead of going right into Florida as a Cat 5. And hurricane season is in peak, but it hasn't been impacting overall hail activity at all. We've, again, Hurricane Dorian was happening. It was still hailing every day. So that was kind of crazy. And drought concerns are pretty minimal. Overall, the United States has been quite wet since about last year, around July or so. So drought hasn't been a big deal. So probabilities for the rest of this year for the El Nino. I think we're going to be in neutral phase going into the winter, and that's going to affect 2020's forecast. I do not think we'll see La Nina, and I also am not super confident that we're going to sneak back into the El Nino at all. Let's see, did we get any? Okay. All right, so looking for analogs, what this year has been so far, try to get an idea of what we're looking at for 2019 fall season. Closest thing so far, 95, 98, and 07 seem to be pretty kind of closely following. Last 20 years, there are 3 other years that were kind of vague analogs. 2015, specifically the way the Southern Plains was with the rain, the high amounts of rain, and the hail kind of being minimized because of that. 2009, 2003, just coming from an El Nino and going down into neutral. All the analog years had a waning El Nino, active August, and around average hail seasons across the nation. So what does that mean for the fall this year? I just want to throw out before we get in there what technically is like an average fall season. You know, we mentioned the fall hail season, and it's not anything really that crazy. It's pretty hit or miss. Overall, way less large-scale events than the spring has. The spring has multiple. It's pretty easy to kind of see from far out. The fall, if we get like 3 large-scale events between September 1st and December 31st, that's pretty good. So, you know, the average is 494 reports, and that is for the nation from September through December. So that's all 4 of those months put together, only 494 reports. Again, we had about 1,100 just last month, so obviously the activity is significantly less. All it really comes down to, you get a couple events, then things are going to be rocking and rolling, or if there isn't too much, then, well, I don't know. Seeing as Hurricane Dorian did cut into me doing this, I was going to do this a day after Labor Day, and of course, Mother Nature had other ideas in mind, so we got about halfway through this month, and we are already more than halfway to this average just this month, so it's kind of giving you an idea of what happens and why typical most of the hail falls in September and really starts tapering off by the time the year is over. September and October tends to be where you get most of your activity, so December is usually very inactive. So what does that mean for this year? I think the unusually high activity should continue through basically the rest of September. I say that with quite a bit of confidence. I wrote this at the end of August, and I'm continuing to have to change that at all going into doing the forecast for today because we're about halfway through the months and we're still seeing quite a bit of activity, again, relative to what we see in the fall. I think the long range models are showing a little warmer than average October across the United States, and that should increase the hail potential over a larger area of the country for a little bit longer than normal, and that should kind of increase that activity potential. And finally, I say the winds of winter as a Game of Thrones reference. It'll put a hard stop to hail season eventually. I think most of the hail is going to happen before October 15th, and I think we're going to have an above average fall season. I can say with confidence because, again, we're closing in on that number already, and we're only 13 days into September. The activity is going to primarily happen this month, and then a good chunk, probably first half, if we're lucky, first 2/3 of October. But I think by the time Halloween rolls around, we get into that holiday season, it's going to really taper off, and maybe only an event or 2 at best as we come to the end of 2019. Quite a bit of the analogs had a real hard stop once we got towards the later parts of the fall, unlike other years where you could, sneak out an event close to Christmas even. I don't know if that's going to be so much the case. So I say starting off down south, the Gulf Coast, that's your best chance of seeing hail in November and December. So if anything happens, it'll be pretty late. But meanwhile, further up north, because I didn't time these animations right, hail season's basically done in the Northeast and far north, so north of Minneapolis. I think you guys are basically done. It's going to start getting cold. I mean, it was in the 30s this morning in Maine, so I think that's going to be all she wrote. Hail activity ending in early October. So this is a pretty wide area. So I have either the Colorado Front Range, areas where there's going to be a hail risk today, and areas where it's been hail in the past few days. This is all going to be what's going to be a risk, again, through October, through early October anyway. As it's going to be warmer than normal, you're going to have more available warmth and instability. But I think most of the activity, I think this is going to be pretty standard looking at for all the years that we've been keeping an eye on. It's going to be focused mostly in the Central Plains and going a little further east into Arkansas. I think that's where most of the activity is going to be, especially once we start heading into October. The rest of this month, most of the lower 48, I think, is at risk. If you get like north of probably Nashville and then east coast, you could see a couple more systems spit out that occasional hail like we've been seeing the past couple weeks. And eventually, as we get closer and closer, we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the year. Once we get down to November, anywhere here in the yellow, if anything even happens at all, it would be pretty much confined to the Gulf Coast. Again, this is pretty normal. I'm not putting anything outlandish on this forecast. I think there'll be more activity than normal for everywhere in the green and red, but I think there's nothing too crazy about this forecast from what I've was able to look at. So that was the 2019 fall hail forecast for today, Friday the 13th. Looks like we could see some quarter-size hail across the Detroit area, back as far west as Fort Wayne, Indiana, and even over towards Cleveland. A small chance. I'm getting 2% up to quarter-size hail. I think the chances of this turning into a line of storms is kind of high, so it's really minimizing the potential for hail. But if anything does get going, could see that bit of hail, and you see the latest model run there showing if the initial development, if anything stays isolated for about an hour, could see a little dump of hail, but for the most part, this is a lot of turning into a line. Could be a tornado threat, to be some high winds, but for the most part, the hail is going to be fairly minimal. Going into your Saturday, we could be getting to the very end of the chances across Minneapolis. We could see up to some golf ball size hail south of Minneapolis down towards northwestern sections of Iowa. And that'll be through the afternoon and evening hours. Maybe some smaller hail further to the north, possibly as far north as where Lake Superior kind of dips in here by Duluth. And there's that future radar. Pay particular attention. Again, kind of isolated storms, but if they get going, they can be kind of nasty, have up to golf ball size hail. It's really just kind of narrowing down exactly where that's going to occur, and this only ends at 7 p.m. I think some storms will continue after that as well. Finally, checking in on the tropics here. We have some activity going on. This is potential tropical cyclone 9. Looks like that should form into tropical storm Humberto in the next 24 hours or so. We have this area that we've been watching since it came off of Africa, heading towards the Lesser Antilles. I think it'll eventually turn into something, and then once something forms, we'll get a better idea of what's going to happen. Where is it when it turns into a tropical cyclone? How quick is it moving? What have you? It could end up just going out to sea somewhere, or it could end up in the Caribbean. We'll see. We'll find out. It's tropical systems. We're just kind of paying attention to what could happen, and then we have another wave that has come off the coast of Africa that we'll be watching as well. So quite a bit of activity potential. And then here is the track the National Hurricane Center put out at 11 a.m., Sharpie free, with the no risk to probably most of the United States. Things have been trending more and more east pretty much every single run. I think this is going to take a hard curve, maybe bring some showers right along the coast. Some tropical storm watches are out for the east coast of Florida. I think this will become Humberto. Weak tropical storm, likely to stay far enough off the coast where you might see some showers, but for the most part, it's not going to be that big of a deal, and this is going to shoot out to sea, probably turn into a hurricane, but at that point, the United States aren't in play. So that's all I got for you guys for today. Make sure you follow us here on Facebook. Hit see first. for all of our updates in the event of any big storms happening today or through the weekend. Make sure you check that out. We'll have forecast graphics for this weekend and videos next week. I will be on vacation, but Heather or Frank or somebody will be doing the forecast instead. If you have any issues with the website, you want us training, you're new, or you're getting frustrated with something, go ahead, give us a call, and we can happily set up a training for you and your team. And the number right there on the screen, 855-334-4245. You can call us to set up a training. Got any comments, questions, or concerns you're interested in Hailtrace? You can email us as well. Visit our website for more details, of course, and follow us on Instagram and all of our other social media platforms if you're watching us on YouTube or Periscope, or most of you probably watch on Facebook. So hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you guys in about a week. I'm going off to the beach on a coast that doesn't have hurricane potential and just enjoying that. And I'll see you guys a little over a week from now. And we'll be back here on Monday. Don't worry, we'll still be doing those daily 12 p.m. hail forecasts even while I'm gone. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Cross those fingers. Maybe we'll get some live coverage in there. Maybe a big storm happens. Not, I'll see you guys then. Enjoy your weekend.